All right. How's everyone doing?
Good. Okay.
Any good Atlas stories to share?
Not yet.
I'm sure they'll come. All right. So I have two main things that I want to talk about tonight, or at least one of them. So I might go ahead and jump into the first one of those topics, and then I'll probably ask about the second one and see if folks want to talk about that. And then I will open up the floor to you all to ask questions if you have them. So one thing that we've been getting a lot of questions about, and there's been a little confusion over, is which species count as singing when they're vocalizing. So which species are appropriate to use the S code for. So I'm working on a chart laying this out. So I think that will be helpful. I worked on that this afternoon and hope to have that ready in a few days. I'm probably going to run it by a few people to make sure that everyone agrees with it before I share it more broadly. But the way to think about the singing bird code is that it should be used for the primary vocalization that's used during the breeding season to communicate some information about a breeding bird or from a breeding bird. So if you think about crows, cawing crows, that is a vocalization that they use year round. That does not necessarily indicate any information about breeding. So we would just consider that a call. Same thing with blue jays doing their JJ or their Tulaloo. So corvids are one example. Blue jays do have a song that they will use that is very quiet, and I don't think is heard that often. So you could potentially use S for blue jay. Real quickly, I'll just go over the kind of other broad groups that this applies to. Waterfowl, gulls and terns, herons and egrets, ruby-throated hummingbirds, vultures, raptors, including falcons, kingfishers, cedar waxwing, and then a few species to use caution with. So if you hear a chickadee, if it's singing, doing Phoebe, 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 that's singing. If it's doing chickadee dee dee, that is a call. I didn't realize I was going to be doing bird impersonations tonight. Okay, gnatcatcher is another one. So a lot of the time, if you hear a gnatcatcher doing its sort of angry sound, it's calling. There's a similar song that it used. This is getting kind of into the weeds. So you may want to listen to gnatcatcher vocalizations if you have like the Sibley app or something similar, or look it up online. And then similar story with nuthatches. So just like ank ank for a white-breasted nuthatch is a call, but then they have a very similar sounding song. Okay, other things that do count as singing are rails vocalizing, owls hooting, woodpeckers drumming. So that this is drumming on a tree, not doing their call, because they use that year round. Grouse drumming and nighthawks booming. This is the list I've come up with so far, based on what I've found from other atlases, kind of what they have used to determine what counts as singing. I know that's a lot to think about. This is not something to like panic about or get too concerned about. We'll just all do our best. And then people have been asking if they need to go back in and change, if they've used S code for any of these things, if they need to go back in and switch those to H. You don't necessarily need to. You definitely can if you want to. We will probably be in our data review, changing those automatically to H's. So if you've just given S code to something, it probably doesn't matter because S and H are both possible codes. Where it becomes an issue is if you have used S7 or M codes and so now you have upgraded those species to probable breeders in a block. If that is the only probable code that that species has received in that block, it will be sort of downgraded back to possible breeder. So that could be an issue. If, for a lot of our common species, at least in blocks where we have people birding regularly, they will most likely have received other probable codes or even be confirmed. So that's really going to be inconsequential. So I'm not going to specifically tell everyone to go back and change all of those S codes. I will kind of let you handle that at your discretion. I just want everyone to be aware of how those will end up being treated, and we can all kind of going forward try our best to follow those guidelines. So like I said, I will be creating a chart for this to share with everyone that will help. That's what I have to share about that. So what questions do you all have on that topic? Feel free to shout out or put it in.
Amber, I have a question. We're new. My husband here, Henry, has done this on the computer for the last ones, the last atlas, and now we're using cell phones, and it's completely. I don't know. I don't see any way for me to connect birds that I see, and I can identify. I see the. It's just tonight. I can see that it's asking me, is there a call? And what's the code to use, the place to put that in. But is that going to the atlas?
So you are keeping your eBird checklist on your phone? That's how you're recording your checklist?
Yes, is that how you do it?
Okay. Yeah, you need to switch over to the Pennsylvania Bird Atlas portal in your mobile app.
In the app.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can try real quick to put the instructions for that into the chat.
Yes, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah, we have it's in our handbook, and then there's also a page on the website. So I will put the link to that page.
A website for what? Which website?
It is our eBird website.
eBird website.
Well, it's not regular, it's through eBird, but it's not just the regular eBird website. It's the Pennsylvania Bird Atlas website in eBird.
Okay.
Sorry, I kind of jumped the gun on you all, I guess, on this topic. So if I've just put that website in the chat, this will take you to our Atlas website, but specifically to this page. So it should say Pennsylvania Bird Atlas up in the top left corner. So once you're done with this page, if you just click on where it says Pennsylvania Bird Atlas, that will take you back to the home page where you can get to all the information. But if you scroll, so if you're on this page, so first is like sign up for eBird. Step 2 is how to access the portal. So there are some photo instructions on how you do that if you're on an Android device or an iOS device. It's pretty easy once you do it a time or two. If you're keeping your checklists via or using your phone, once you switch into the portal on your phone or your mobile device, it remains in the portal. So as long as you're birding in Pennsylvania and you're following Atlas guidelines, you can just keep it in the portal. Yep. And then if you are if you're recording your checklists through a web browser, like on your computer, you need to go to a different website, which is on this page as well. And you go to that website every single time you enter a checklist.
You can use a browser then.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And if you need to edit checklists, often the easiest way for folks to do that is to go do that through a computer, find your checklists, and edit them that way. That's a lot easier than doing it on your phone.
Okay.
Can we find all the codes on that same site?
On the website? Oh, on the webpage?
Why don't,
Well, the one you have listed on the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so let me just go back to the. This is just the regular homepage, ebird.org/atlaspa/home. Or if you just Google Pennsylvania Bird Atlas, it will be the first or second link that will come up. So
Okay.
it's through eBird, but it is specific to our project.
Yes, that's what I need. Okay.
You can find the handbook on there also. So that's going to be really helpful if you're just getting going.
I've seen that on the Facebook group
Okay.
where people have been talking about which code to use where. Okay. And when.
All right. And then someone asked, is there a way we're supposed to differentiate between general atlasing and point counts? I'm gonna save that question. I want to keep us on this singing or S code topic for just a little bit longer to make sure we've covered questions on that, and then I'll get back to that question. A couple of people have raised, Sharon has raised her hand.
Hi, Amber. I have a question about how the singing code applies to the Epimetics flycatchers, like the willow and Acadian. Are those calls, can they be singing, or would you recommend using habitat instead?
Those are considered singing for those species. I
Okay,
mean, they have calls too, but like, I don't know, like doing Phoebe is singing. Yeah.
like the Fitzview
Yep,
is
yep.
considered singing?
Mhm. But then you could also hear like a willow or alder flycatcher doing like a wit wit wit. That would be a call.
Okay,
So you do, you kind of need to know something about the species. Usually if you look up their vocalizations in like the Sibley app, it will often distinguish by calling them a song or a call. It's not always 100% in agreement with what we're saying, but so that's not completely helpful, but use your best judgment. If you're not sure, you may want to default to H, or just be
Okay.
especially careful if you're trying to use S7 or M, I think.
okay, thank you.
Any more questions about singing or habitat or any other codes?
Okay, I do, Amber.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, like a month ago, I recorded a chickadee singing a song that sounded to me like a Carolina chickadee. Do I live in Butler County and we're not supposed to have Carolina chickadees? But I mean, I didn't see is there a place on the Atlas forum for a Carolina to record the fact that it may have had like a Carolina chickadee or a hybrid?
Are you birding on your phone? Or are you recording checklists on the website?
Well, on the website.
On the website, yep. You can, so if this gets tricky if you are in the hybrid zone, or if you just in general are unable to determine which chickadee species it is. In which case you want to select like the black cap / Carolina chickadee option, which you should be able to do.
Is that like under the rare species then? Because it's not under the regular species list.
Probably. I don't know what the like typical options for Butler County would be. That would be the
Usually they expect just a black cap.
this black cap. You should still be able to enter something different. If you type that in, it should still be an option. You might need to you'd obviously need to use comments to describe what you heard and saw.
Actually, this wasn't so odd chickadee because it went back and forth between a tip like it a typical Carolina song, and then it switched to a typical black cap song. So
Yeah,
it was so
so
doing other ones. But
you-
there were a couple other black caps around singing, so maybe it sort of tried to imitate them.
yeah, I don't think you'd want to try to identify that individual.
Mhm,
So you would want to record that as Black Cap slash
mhm.
Carolina.
Yeah, because I mean, usually black cap chickies are like, I would say like Pittsburgh. I mean, Carolina chickies are like Pittsburgh on south, so it's rather unusual to have one this far north. And so I heard it a couple of times, but I didn't have my digital recorder with me at the time.
Of course.
And finally, I did get a good recording of it back in my backyard. Then
Okay.
but there's like so I'm glad I got the recording. And so I can definitely tell it sounds the the few several songs that sang, it does sound a lot like the Carolina Chickie. Because I have a brother down in Virginia, and when I go birding down there, all they have is Carolina Chickies. It sounds just like sneehee, something like that.
Mhm.
Like the not quite as clear as the black cap that we have around here.
Yeah, yeah, and they're tricky because my understanding is that if you're, in sort of the hybrid zone, which is expanding, that they can sound like one or the other and not necessarily be one or the other. So
You ever see that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
in Butler County too, and I've noticed west of me there's a park, Brush Creek Park. I've always had blackcap there. Last year I started hearing Carolina, but on the eBird list, when I went down and looked, I was able to find the Carolina slash blackcap chickadee and mark it as that. And I'm
Yeah.
going to start marking them like that
Perfect.
when I hear both.
So it might be expanding the range again.
They're expanding. They're
They're-
coming up. They're
Mm.
coming up fast.
Yeah.
So I did see something interesting the other day as well. So as soon as I came home from work, I changed my clothes because I wanted to go out in the garden. And as soon as I stepped back on the front porch, I heard a Baltimore Oriole. Now, this particular Baltimore Oriole doesn't sing very much. He calls, but he doesn't really have like much of a song. So, but so, so I looked up into a tree. I thought it sounded like he was coming from, and he flew from that tree to another tree, mostly dead tree with only a few, with mostly dead branches, and there was a female in that tree, and then she had that nest material in the bill, and then the male and female they mated. But while she was still carrying the nest material, they mated, and then she flew off and then she flew off into the big black walnut tree, and then I found out the nest the nest she was working on. Yeah, so it was about halfway up in the tree on the north side then. But it's like I like three confirmed bring bird status like 20 seconds.
She was multitasking.
It's not very often I get. So that was very, very interesting then.
Yeah, and then
That's
it
awesome.
rained a little, so
Mhm.
yeah.
All right. Any other breeding code questions?
Yeah, Amber, hi, this is Don. So I,
So,
eBird will only allow you to put in a single code. All right. So
Yep.
like I see a singing male goldfinch, right? And he's on territory. And so that's an S code. But then I see a pair of goldfinch, male and female, in suitable habitat. All right. So I go in and I add two more goldfinch and I change that code to suitable habitat. I'm sorry, change that to pair in suitable habitat. But it wipes out or I should say, it trumps the singing male.
Yep,
Okay, so then I end up with 3 goldfinch, and the code is parent suitable habitat. Is that, I mean,
Yep,
is that appropriate?
fine.
Is that correct?
yep, it's not, eBird isn't recording that as that you saw 3 birds that were a pair, right? It's just that you saw 3 birds and there was a pair included. So even if you saw like 5 goldfinches and only 1 was singing, you could still have 5 entered in the S code, right? That makes sense.
Okay.
So you just want to use the highest code that you observe.
Okay, so, yeah, and that's the one that it will accept,
Yep,
right? Is the highest ranked code.
yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's what you want to use. So you could like, was that Clark, the person who was just telling the Oriole story? Yeah, Clark. That like, it looked like, or it sounded like that all happened very quickly. So you probably wouldn't have time to code all those things, but theoretically you could like have watched each of those, like nest material, copulation, finding the nest with the Oriole, and coded each one and then seen the next one. And so if that happens, you just want to make sure you end up with the highest code that you observed
Okay.
Okay.
on your checklist that you submit.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna move back to this question that's in the chat. If you think of other breeding code questions, if anything else pops up while we're talking, feel free to ask. So is there a way we're supposed to differentiate between general atlasing and point counts? So if you don't know what this question is about, we are doing volunteer point counts this atlas. Point counts are a standardized survey where you stand in one location for a set period of time and record all the birds that you see or hear during that time. So we have 4 point count locations within each block. We have more information on how to do this again on the website. If you have questions about this, you can contact me or contact a county or regional coordinator. We are asking that pretty experienced birders do this because our point counts are 6 minutes long. So you just do a stationary 6-minute eBird checklist. So you need to be able to identify everything that you hear pretty quickly and feel pretty confident in that to be able to kind of accurately do a point count. So if you're a newer birder, you might want to wait a year or 2 and work on your identification skills, especially by sound, because with doing a point count, you end up typically identifying most species by sound. But we have about 19,000 of them across the state. So I promise you that there will be more to do in subsequent years. So, if you're still working on your skills, you might want to hold off a little bit. So back to the question. So in general atlasing, when you submit your checklist, your location is usually just the personal location that eBird populates, or it might be a hotspot if that is appropriate to use. When you are doing a point count, we have this information in the point count instructions, but you're asked to name the personal location to give it the name of what that point count is named. So it's the block name, the old block name, and then underscore, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on which point you're at in the block. So that is all you need to do for the name of the checklist. And then as you're submitting it, or if you forget, you can go in and do this after you submit, then you need to share it with PA Bird Atlas, which is the eBird account that I'm using to capture all of this point count data. And so those instructions are laid out in our point count instructions, which I can probably just go ahead and link to that as well, in case anyone wants to look at it. So this is under our handbook section on the website. you can get to it there as well. Okay, more point count questions. I think the point counts themselves are quite straightforward. Like I said, it's just a stationary eBird checklist. Seeing the points and figuring out how to get to the points has been the more confusing topic. So if folks want, I can go over that and talk about that a little more, maybe after we ask a few more other questions.
Yeah, I have two questions.
Okay.
One is there any way to see what point counts have been done?
No, not at this time. We are hoping to, so like on the web page where you can see all of the locations in a county, we're hoping to update that at the end of each season. So like when you're preparing for next season, you'll be able to go in, and my hope is that we'll just kind of disappear all the ones that have been done. So you can just see the remaining ones. But there's no effective way to do that, you know, during season, because it's changing every single day and it takes some work to update that.
So the
So
best way is just to
you need to contact
let
the county.
the county person know that you've done
Mhm.
this.
Yep. So
And
you
then my
can-
second question was, how often do they need to be done? Is it just once in the
Yeah.
5 years, or?
Yep, they're each being done once over the whole span of the atlas. I mean, it's very likely that we're not going to complete all of these, but that's okay. We're going to try to get done what we can. It'll be a lot of extra data, no matter how much we get done. And so kind of what we're aiming for is that in each county, we're aiming to get about 20 to 25% of the points done each year so that it's spread out across the whole atlas. You know, we don't want, like, we do have a few counties where they could get done all in one year, because they're small counties and they have a lot of birders. But ideally, we will space that out so that it's not like temporally biased by all being done in one year.
Okay, and then the last question would be, you're trying to get within about 6/10 of a mile,
Mhm.
because I'm in Sullivan and Tioga County, and a lot of those areas are very rugged
Mhm.
and really don't have a lot of places to get to. So as long as I get within about 6/10, that's okay.
Yeah, that is, so that, yeah, just to explain that for folks who aren't familiar, we are giving an exact point on the map, but we're saying that if you can try to get within 0.6 miles of that point and try to be in the same habitat as what that point is in, that's okay to do it in one of those other locations. So what that is doing is giving you all more flexibility or more options to do a point in case it's in a inaccessible location.
All right, thank you.
And well, there was one more thing I wanted to say and it just slipped my mind.
I have one thing to add. You do need to contact your county coordinator before you do any point counts,
Yes.
because we are keeping track of who's doing point counts where, so that it doesn't get duplicated and so that we know who's where.
Yes, good point, Cheryl. Thank you. So you
Yeah,
want to.
thank you. I did do that before I did Sullivan County.
Yep, contact your county coordinator. You can tell them if you're interested in a certain block or area, or you can just say, hey, I'm available to do counts. What, where would it be best for me to go? And they can help you out.
Yeah, thanks.
Also, like, you don't have to just do them in your county if you're traveling to somewhere else in the state, especially if you're going to a more remote area. We need a lot of help in those places. So if you're headed up for a vacation or just even any kind of short trip, because a lot of these, well, depending on where they are, some of these are very easily accessible and right along roads. So you could do them really easily. You could do like a couple of them at least while you're doing something else, as long as you have time in the morning. So you might be able to squeeze them in while you're doing other things. So please do reach out to other county coordinators if you're available to do them in other places as well. Oh, I remember. I just wanted to explain the 0.6 mile kind of radius. That is a buffer around the point. So it helps, because when you do a point count, when you're doing repeat point counts across the landscape, ideally you will not be detecting the same birds at more than one count. So that's giving you a buffer. So if you're, if you're over, like say you have a point right here and you're 0.6 miles away, and then you end up doing this count a little bit in this direction, you should still be far enough apart that you're not detecting the same birds. And that also on the other side, that helps make sure that you're not getting too close to block boundaries. So I've had people ask about that. So just to explain why that number. All right. A question. Actually, no, before I change, I'll just keep talking about point counts so we don't jump back and forth too much. Okay.
Okay.
Would anyone like me to go over looking at the Hero web page where the point count locations are and showing you how I look at those on Google Maps?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
This is the part that's been the trickiest for people. So I'm going to try to share my my phone screen real quick so I can show you all how I do this on my phone. Bear with me for just a second. Oh my goodness, all these messages are popping up now that I'm connecting. All my phone messages are popping up on the computer now. Okay. Can you all see that?
No.
No?
Do we need to do anything?
Nope. Do you see?
I see
Oh,
you.
hang on. I need to share this. I know what I'm doing wrong. Okay. Do you
Okay,
see
that
this now?
works.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this is my phone screen. Sorry, there's a lot going on in the background here. Okay, so when I open up the Hero webpage, this is linked to on the instruction sheet for the volunteer point counts. So across the top here, if you can see where I'm scrolling across, I see my different regions. All right, so I'm just going to open up Allegheny Plateau. There are different ways you can do this. You all should feel free to do this in a different method. Like if you have a GPS, you can download all of these point count locations right here. By clicking you can download them for an entire region or just for a county. If you click on those little red circles with the like little download arrow in them, so you can download those to your phone or to your computer. If you use like Gaia or Avenza, you can upload them in those apps and use them that way. So feel free to use a different method if you know how to do something else. Not everyone has access to the same things or knows how to use the same tools. So here we're trying to lay out the most basic option for figuring out how to get somewhere. So I'm just going to open up the Cameron points. So I just tapped on Cameron. So that just opened them up in Google Maps. Now I am in on an Android device. So this does work slightly differently if you're on an Apple. So I'm going to zoom in. So these are all the counts, all the point count locations for the county. So if you zoom in, then you can see the names. So if you see like these bottom four, we've got 47C61, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So those are the 4 point count locations in that block 47C61. We're using the old Atlas block names because these are unique names. The names that are used in eBird now are not unique, actually. There are a few duplicate names across the state, which is a whole different story. But we've tried on most, like if you go to the block map tool, or the Atlas map tool, you know, we're trying to show both the names there and in different places. So anyway, so now what I do is, like, say I'm going to go tomorrow to do these 4 counts, or to try to do these 4 counts, because you can't always, you know, you're not always going to be able to get to all of them if you're doing these. They could be on private land or too far away from a trail for you to get to. That's okay. If you can do 2 or 3 of them, that's fine. Still do those, and then just let that county coordinator know that you weren't able to get that other one done, or 2 of them done, or whatever. So, but here, this one looks easy because this is really close to a highway. So I zoom in here and I see there's the highway and then this forest road intersects it. So that would be a really easy landmark for me to find. So I tap and hold down right on that spot. And again, this is how you do it on an Android phone. And then I swipe up there and I have this option to measure distance. So I tap that, and then it's going to measure the distance from that point that I selected to wherever I move it to. So I just hold down and move that black circle till it gets right over the point count location. And it's telling me there at the bottom that that's 0.2 miles away. So that's a way now I can write down some notes, and I know I want to go to the intersection of that highway and Forest Road to try to do that point count, and I'll be well within the acceptable distance. It gets a little trickier. Let me close that out. So zooming back out, there are those 4 points again. So see this one down here, number 4. This is a lot farther away from anything. So I could measure the distance from this road and see if it's close enough. If not, then I need to decide if I want to, depending on if this is public or private land, obviously don't trespass. But say this was public land, then I could decide I can't access this point, or okay, I can walk up this 12-mile run a little ways until I get close enough to that point to do. Does this make sense? No response. And I want everyone to keep in mind this.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Tom. This goal of
Sounds good.
doing these volunteer point counts, this is secondary to general atlasing. So getting out there and atlasing is your first priority. If you don't want to do these point counts, or you think they're too hard or whatever, don't do them. That's fine. If you do want to try them, please do. And if you have more questions, or if you're looking at the points in your block and you can't figure out how to do this, let me know, or let one of the other coordinators know, and we're happy to help and to try to get you some more information on like where would be kind of good locations to head to try to do the count. We're glad to help. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing that now. Any more questions about that? Is there anything else I can explain about that process? I know it sounds a little bit overwhelming at first. But I do encourage you to take a look at your points. Like my home block, when I looked at them, 2 of them were right by places that I can really easily get to. I didn't have to really walk anywhere. They were super easy. 2 of them were in the middle of Rothrock. So Those ones were trickier, but 2 of them were super easy. So you might be surprised by the points in your block.
Sure. Is there a way to own the block? If you
Yeah.
think you'd be doing a lot of birding in a particular block, is there a way to take like ownership of it? To
Yep,
tell everybody, okay, I'm here.
you can sign up to be Principal Atlaser. I will share the link to that in the chat now. So you do not need to sign up as Principal Atlaser. You can go birding anywhere. Even if someone is signed up for a block as Principal Atlaser, anyone else is still welcome to go birding there. So I'm trying to stay away from the terminology of owning a block. Nobody owns any of the blocks. We're all working together to complete these blocks. But yes,
Okay.
if you're interested in a block and you want to take responsibility for trying to complete the block, this is where you do that. Just shared it. Oh, nope, sorry, I just sent that to Dawn as a direct message. Hold on. There we go. All right, there's a question about the mile limit on a checklist. We had a trail that was 2/3 of a mile out and back, so a total of 1 1/3 mile, but within a mile boundary. I did not create a new checklist since I was within the same mile. Yeah, I think that's fine. And if you go like, if you're trying to complete, like I do a loop by my house that's like just a little bit over a mile, I don't really worry about that because it's just a loop around this little habitat patch that would be a little bit silly for me to create a new checklist for that extra little bit. So like this is a little bit, you know, there's a little bit of leeway and a little bit of gray space here. So if you were continuing for farther on that trail, you know, you could try to go ahead and start a new checklist at about a mile. But since you're just going out and back, I think that's fine. Just remember, like, you know, the point here is to try to, so the way that we receive the data is all the bird observations on your checklist are linked to that location that you set that checklist to when you submit it. So, you know, we're just trying to keep things linked to nice and tight locations because that helps with the habitat analyses and things that will be done on down the line.
I just.
All right, I got asked about going over the details of collecting atlas data while doing breeding bird survey routes. Someone has a visitor. This is a little tricky. So some people who, I think some people have locations set up for all of their BBS route stops and they eBird along the way. So you can do that if you want. If you don't have those set up, that's kind of a lot of work. Another option that's been suggested is if you have a partner who goes with you, like someone who drives for you, then like you could, you know, you do your route like usual, and then the other person can do the atlasing at each stop. There's not really any other good way to do it. You could, you know, you could go back in and like use your BBS data to make all of those eBird checklists after, if you, as long as you know exactly where all of the stop locations are. You could also just, if you don't want to go through all that work, you could just only atlas kind of the more interesting things, like maybe confirmed codes or more interesting species. So you could just submit those as incidental reports. Those are kind of the options. I don't know if anyone else here has a good suggestion on how to handle this. Feel free to jump in. I haven't quite figured out how I'm doing that myself because I haven't set up locations for my route stops. It seems like a lot of work. I don't know, Steve, did that help with your question at all?
Yeah, I have all of the spots listed on eBird,
Mhm.
all 50 of our spots, so that should be fine. We'll be able to pull that off.
Yeah, you can, I mean, you could just make notes as you go. And I think it'd be tough to do your point count and do an eBird list at the same time, just for one person to do that.
Yeah, I think between the two of us, we'll be able to
Okay.
handle
You've
it.
got
So
two people, yeah, then
yeah,
that'll be easier.
thanks.
Okay. All right, so I got asked a question about, it sounds like someone is doing point counts, but isn't sharing them with the Atlas account, the PA Bird Atlas account. I don't think there's any way for someone else to share those, but we're not going to receive those. Like, I'm going to miss those. They're not going to get lumped into the data that I'm collecting for the point count data. So maybe just let a person know that if they're not going to share them, then there's not a lot of point in doing them. Like, they're still atlasing, I guess, but they're not doing point count data that I'm going to get. So. All right. We've been getting some questions about the recently fledged young code. So this is one of the confirmed codes. So you see birds that are clearly young birds. When is it appropriate to code those as recently fledged young? I think actually if you see waterfowl, like Canada geese, goslings, or if you see ducklings, they're probably the easiest, among the easiest to make a determination for this. Because, okay, so the idea is if you see young birds, you are ideally coding them in the block or like pretty close to where they were born, where their nest was. So you want to be coding young birds that are not capable of really like strong flight, because a lot of species within just like 2 or 3 weeks after they fledge, they will move pretty significant distances potentially from the nest location, because they're often moving to different habitat types that like fills the needs of young birds better than it did like the nest location. So often birds, like mature forest birds, are often moving there. Once their fledglings can move, they're moving them towards like thicker habitat where they're well protected. So ideally, if you're seeing young birds that look like they can fly pretty well, like flying like an adult, you probably want to try not to use this code for them. So that can be a little trickier with like songbirds and things, but you want to look for, obviously they're still in the care of adults. They have fleshy gapes, like the corners of their beak are a little puffy and often like yellowish. They have really short tail feathers, and then you're looking for them like maybe they're fluttering around or whatever. They're not doing like direct flight like adults. With waterfowl, going back to that, if they're at all downy, like if they don't have flight feathers, that obviously works. So Canada geese goslings aren't flying until they're like 2 or 3 months old, and they look pretty, like you can still tell they're young, but they look like Canada geese. So if they look at all like a young, like a fuzzy-ish little gosling, like you can still code them, and same goes for ducklings.
I was going to code this afternoon. I was birding and I came across 4 turkey vultures, and 2 of them were young with the black heads, but they took off and they were strong flyers when they flew off with their parents. So I shouldn't count them as fledgling.
Yeah, probably not.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I know like the urge is so strong to
Oh, it is.
code them because you get so excited, right?
Yes, I was.
I mean, you can still code those adult birds. If they're perched, you can code them as in habitat. So you can still get information from that.
Yeah, I'll put it in the notes anyway, that they were young birds
Yeah.
without coding. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was noted like with waterfowl, if you're looking at young birds, use caution if you're close to a block border. Like, you know, they could have potentially crossed from one block into another. There's a lot. Yeah, with a lot of these things, you got to use your best judgment. All right. Did that answer that question well enough? See if Tom.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm coding everything that way. No.
All right. So someone asked about, is it true that once you've confirmed a species for a block, you don't need to enter breeding codes for that species going forward? So it is true that once you've confirmed it for a block, you're good for that species. So you don't need to go out and specifically seek out that species any longer, but you can still capture lots of useful data, especially if we're thinking about phenological data. So when is this species breeding? When are they in these different stages of their breeding cycle? So you can certainly still code observations that you make of that species, and especially like in different locations in the block, it's still very helpful. I know people have asked about like, do I really need to code like H and S again and again, like especially if the species has already been confirmed. So that's a little bit up to your discretion. I'm not going to tell people to code everything all the time, especially with this project going on for 5 years. I don't want people to burn out. So kind of what we've been saying is like, obviously, if you're going to a new block or new area and you know that it hasn't been birded a lot, or you don't know, you didn't do your research ahead of time and like check what all has been coded, you obviously want to try to code everything then to make sure that you cover things and don't forget something. However, if you're birding like in your yard, you do a checklist there every day, you don't need to code like H and S all the time, or even other codes if you've confirmed the species, but you may want to try to do like, say once a week, do a more comprehensive checklist where you do try to capture those things. But again, that's up to your discretion. Like if that's gonna like burn you out from atlasing and keep you from like enjoying atlasing in other places, then it's okay if you don't do that all the time. I'm not gonna like be hard on that. So just try to make sure you're like capturing, especially if you have a mourning dove pair in your yard, you can try to capture it as it moves through different stages of the cycle. If you're able to do that, that sort of thing is very useful because then we get all those dates. When are they building? When are they on eggs? When do they have babies? When are they fledging? I think I've covered the questions that are currently in the chat. And I covered the two main things I wanted to talk about, which were the codes and using seeing the point count locations. So feel free to jump in with any more questions. We've got a few more minutes here.
A Tom question. There's really no harm in putting in too much data, correct? You know, a lot of us were in Westmoreland, we're bike trail birders. We go out one way, we come back the same way. Probably use two different checklists. Sometimes we go 1.5 miles in the same habitat. Come back and record almost all the same birds on the way back. There's no harm done, correct?
No, eBird's designed to capture all of that data, so code as much as you want. You might even get something that you like forgot to code before or something, so.
Yeah, that nuthatch did a grok and not a song, so I had to just add them in as an H.
Clark said that he has in his yard fledgling robins as well as another pair of nest. I have the same thing in my yard. And I have a catbird nest right off my front porch that has babies in it right now. And then like the day that they hatched just a few days ago, I saw another pair of catbirds building a nest, and I got on Google Earth and measured the distance between these two locations, and it was 24 meters. But my house is right in between, so they're clearly separating somehow their territories. I was just thinking about how cool it is, like how tight some urban nesting species can squeeze in. And I think they're using these different structures and things as boundary limits or distinctions. All right, Manny asked about how we're doing data-wise so far across the state. Are we atlasing well? Yes, we're atlasing well. We have, I looked at these numbers last week. We have over 1,500 people who have submitted Atlas checklists so far. And Andy Wilson checked last week, and he said that at the same time in the last Atlas, so 20 years ago, like 5 months in the last Atlas, it was something like 450 or something people who had submitted data so far. So that's cool. We have a lot of people engaged and invested in this and interested. They got up to over 2,000, a little over 2,000 participants last time. I'm hoping that we can get beyond that. But it seems like we're a good chunk of the way there. We have data from about 3/4 of blocks. A lot of those are just a little bit of data, or potentially data from earlier in the season before breeding really started for a lot of species. So, a lot of that's going to get filtered out, but we do, we have people getting out to a lot of places. So I'm really pleased with that. We have around 145 or so confirmed species out of like 190-ish possible species. Of course, we still have a lot of regions and blocks that haven't been touched yet. So a lot of the work I have cut out for me is getting people to go to those places. We're trying to recruit new birders in those places, or we still have a lot of people who are e-birding who are not participating in the Atlas, whether that's because they don't want to or because they haven't heard about the Atlas yet. That's hard to figure out. So I'm constantly thinking about ways to reach those people. I'm open to ideas. And yeah, please keep helping reach out to folks that who are birders. I just wanted to share real quick, we're planning a new way that people will be able to submit data. So this is going to be geared more toward people who aren't like e-birders, aren't like hardcore birders, or just like not not invested in like learning how to use eBird. So this will just be a web page where they can go in and just enter an observation. So it'll be like a little bit like an incidental eBird checklist, but this won't enter into eBird. But so we're gonna push this to like spring turkey hunters or just anyone who like has a hummingbird nest in their yard and they want to share that. If we can like get them to come to this webpage, they can enter the information there. So hoping we can like capture a lot of little bits of data here and there to help out. But I think we're doing well. I'm pleased. I know like some of the tech, like this atlas is very tech oriented, and that has been uncomfortable for some people in some ways. It's stretched us all. But I think by and large, most people are very pleased and find it very helpful to have such an easy way to share data. Tom says in the last atlas, he was still waiting for his dial-up internet to connect for the first time. Let's see. Yeah, so the chat button is down on the bottom, typically, with like a little speech bubble symbol. Sorry, I should point that out, but if you haven't seen that yet. Any other questions? I'm writing a couple notes down. Oh, so there's a question about if we can send a mass email to all eBirders. So that actually did happen. It didn't seem to be received by everyone, but we crafted this nice email about the atlas, and eBird sent it out in, I believe it was the end of April. It was April 20 something. And it went supposedly to anyone who has submitted an eBird checklist in Pennsylvania since January of last year, I believe, of 2023. And Manny says he got it. Yeah, I've talked to a number of people who said they got it. I don't think I received it. I knew the date that it went out because they let me know that it was going out, and I checked through all my folders and my spam and everything and didn't find it. I don't know why. And I've talked to a couple other people who say the same thing. And I know sometimes you see these emails and just disregard them as well. So I don't have a good sense of how many people that reached and how many people read it and maybe got drawn in, but that did happen. All right. Anything else before we wrap up? All right. I'm gonna sign off then. Thank you everyone for joining. I apologize if people are kind of newer to the Atlas and I kind of like jumped right in and bypassed all the intro stuff, but you can find me on the website, and I'll just type my address in the chat real quick. So reach out to me if you're just getting started and you need a little direction. We're glad to help. We have lots of resources to get everyone up to speed. And thank you everyone for all your hard work, and it's amazing to see all the reports rolling in. I'm just always amazed at how much time and effort people will contribute to volunteer efforts. It's really impressive. And Pennsylvania has an amazing atlas. I kind of preach this all the time, but our atlas is so well done and we have so much support from birders, and we're able to accomplish our atlas at a level that a lot of other states are not. So you should all be super proud of yourselves. Really appreciative. So, all right. Have a good night, everyone. Happy birding. Happy atlasing.
Thank you.